everyone. Welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about utilizing ArgoCD and Kubernetes for suicide prevention for LGBTQ plus young people. My colleague here, Alfredo, and I will be presenting this topic on behalf of the Trevor Project. Trevor Project is a nonprofit dedicated for the mental health space for LGBTQ plus community. So if you want to learn more about who we are, what we do, please feel free to scan on the QR code. We also will be sharing this out, and also we'll have this at the end of the presentation, so you can also scan it again there. And with that said, moving into the next slide. So let's talk about what is the Trevor Project. Like mentioned before, the Trevor Project is the leading suicide prevention and crisis intervention services for LGBTQ plus young people. Here at the Trevor Project, we provide 5 major services for people within the US and also now in Mexico. Specifically, the first service is crisis services, which we're going to be talking more about later in this particular session. Crisis services is a service where we're connecting LGBTQ plus young people who have suicide ideation or have other crises that they want to talk through, whether that's through text, SMS, or web chat. Our second service is advocacy, making sure we have a group team to be able to advocate for laws that are more helpful for the LGBTQ plus community. As for our third service is research. We conduct research studies, learning about the trends within the community, as well as understanding where mental health is going for these particular individuals. The fourth service is Trevor Space, pretty much a social platform where the ages between 13 to 24-year-olds can be able to go online, get support, talk about things, and just help each other out. Pretty much a safe space for everyone on the platform. And last but not least is the education and public awareness service, where we're providing mental health resources, as well as material and resources for both the youth and allies who come to our page to learn more about mental health, suicide prevention, and ultimately LGBTQ plus communities. And with that said, I'll pass it over to Alfredo to introduce himself.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm Alfredo Pizana, tech lead here at Trevor. I'm currently focusing on MER technologies and product infrastructure, and I'm leading the development of this amazing application we are going to talk about. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alfredo. And over on my side, my name is Pham. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the engineering manager who get to work closely with Alfredo on our day-to-day operations, particularly that supports many of our verticals here at the Trevor Project. Cool. And so let's talk about what we're going to be sharing. We're going to be sharing 4 different things. First off, it's going to be the project. What did we do here at the Trevor Project, and how we utilize ArgoCD and Kubernetes, as well as many other tools within our system. And that leads us to the architecture, where we're going to be sharing out the high level, as well as deep dive a little bit more into the open source tools. Then we're going to go to challenges and lesson learned from what we've done on the project, and wanted to share it out with you all. So that way, if you were to go down this path or a very similar path, you would be able to avoid certain things. And last but not least, we want to share out the impact of the solution that we have implemented. And so let's start with the project context. So here at the Trevor Project, our mission is to end suicide among LGBTQ plus young people. That means that we want to be able to serve the youth, but at the same time also help others learn the importance of suicide prevention. And the Trevor Project journey started on August 11, 1998, about over 25 years ago, where we first took our first phone call to be able to provide support for LGBTQ plus young people. And ever since then, we have started iterating on our technologies and services, ultimately just moving from having phone calls to having text messages to ultimately having web chats available for youth. But what we wanted to do more is be able to expand these services beyond the United States to global nations, such as what we're going to be talking about today, Mexico. And the reason that we wanted to do this is because we've done research studies how impactful our services are, as well as the need for our services in a global market. And as a result, we started doing some more research, understanding where should we expand to. And we started off with 194 countries. And based on these 5 criteria, safety, scale, equity, language, and learning, we were able to narrow down to 2 countries. It was Mexico and the Philippines. And so the reason that we started with the Mexico first, because it was a neighboring country and it was closer that we can set up operation safely and successfully. And our goal was to be able to deliver this new platform that expanded our services beyond the United States on October 11th of 2022. And we were able to do successfully. The reason this day is so important is the National Coming Out Day within Mexico, and we wanted to align appropriately to market this and be able to have it successfully up and running. And so before, when we were talking about the United States, our services and stuff like that, you'll see here this screenshot captures what we were utilizing before, which is a managed service within Salesforce that allows us to be able to connect to LGBTQ plus young people, as well as make sure we're helping them through updating case records, all through one platform. However, this was not going to work for an expansion. It's going to take a lot of time to scale up, to maintain for various instances globally. And so this led us to the creation of what we called the Global Platform, or CSM, which is Crisis Services Management Platform. Allows us to be able to scale up more quickly, maintain it, and have a better continuous development and delivery. And so this led us to this new UI where we were able to utilize open source technologies and create something like this where you can see the similarities, but at the same time, there are major differences. And we're going to deep dive more so on the back end side of things. And with that said, I'll pass it over to Alfredo to talk more about the back end, pretty much the fun side of things within this project.
Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, talking about a little bit on the architecture side. First, I want to mention about the tools we use for the application. On the infrastructure, we are using GCP. For our source code management, we use GitHub, as well as for action flows for our CI/CD pipelines. And on the infrastructure deployments, we decide to use Terraform as our infrastructure as a code, as well as ArgoCD for our continuous delivery to our Kubernetes application. We are using Kubernetes and Twilio as our contact center platform. Next slide, please. During those conversations about expanding our services, we plan to create a platform that was scalable, open source, and high available, aiming to support multi-language and different type of digital channels and on interactions. In case you see the global platform name somewhere, is the application we created to support multi-language and multi-region. Here on the architecture, you will see at the left the users that's are the youth, and we are currently supporting SMS, WhatsApp, and web chat that are digital channels. We are supporting this for Twilio platform, which is our contact center platform that helps us to support all of that interaction, active interaction in real time. Now, talking a little bit on the database, we choose MongoDB as our persistent storage and ready for as our cache, and it helps us to scale on demand if needed. Now, going a little bit dive into the global platform, you will check next slide, please. You will see that we are using Kubernetes for the infrastructure, and at the left is the UI. We're using one cluster for the UI and another cluster for the backend, and we are using one cluster per environment. So you will see that we will have QA, dev, and stage production, etc. And one of them, there is one cluster for each. And in the middle, you can see there is ArgoCD, which is our content continuous delivery platform that helps us to smoothly release different versions of the application to our different cluster endpoints. At the bottom, you will see that there is GitHub that helps us to automatically trigger those events and deploy that using Terraform, which is our infrastructure as a code platform, which helps us to define what we want to create on GCP and how we want to create that. You go to the next slide, please. Here's an example of a configuration file for Terraform. And specifically for this one, this is a config file for a cluster. So we just want to show us like how we define and how we are reusing, because this is a template where we are reusing different variables to define environments, regions, etc. You go to the next slide, please. Now, talking a little bit more on the customization and scalability, we decided to use customize because we had a goal and a challenge that was, we were trying to find a way to find a method to deploy our apps to Kubernetes automatically. So we decided to use customize files, which help us to create templates for Terraform. At the right, you will see that this is an example of how we organized different applications, reutilizing different YARN files. For example, the application 1, application 2, etc. This is just a template to show you how we decide to create the base and the different applications. You go to the next slide, please. And this is a real example of the results. For example, by using different config maps, deployments, external secrets, etc., we were able to create a real manifest that it's at the right with different values, real values that can be used to automatically deploy through ArgoCD. Could you go to the next slide, please? So why we decide to use ArgoCD? ArgoCD helps us to automatically deploy the design application to a specific target environment. And it also helps us to try different updates and versions for different branches using GitHub or connecting with GitHub. ArgoCD also follows the GitOps pattern of using the repository, the code repository, as a source of truth for defining the desired application state, which means that we can create different branches, different tags to maintain it for different versions of the application depending on the environment. And just to mention, Kubernetes manifest can be specified on different formats, on several ways. And the one we choose was customized application. But there are some others like Hemp and JSON, etc. Could you go to the next slide, please? It is the real result of our infrastructure up and running. You can see different names of different pods that are currently running. And at the right, you will see the versions that we are maintaining on, depending on the environment and the version. For example, you can see that there's a version 0.2.0, 0.7.2 that is healthy and sync. But there are some others that are out of sync, and there should be some others that could be crashing or restarting depending on the test we are running. So this helps us this gives us big visibility of what's happening during the releases and during the development of the project and the code. We can easily identify what's happening if a service is up and running, out of sync, crashing, restarting, or whatever. Could you go to the next slide, please? We will show you an example of what's inside of those elements of the list. Here is a file, a manifest file, which contains all of the config maps, versions, etc. That's what inside of that file. So we can inspect, identify if there is any error, and also we can, since we are automating this and creating all of the files automatically, we can also run scripts to generate those files. But this was tedious and a manual process. That's why we decided to implement ArgoCD to automate everything and smoothly transition from one version to another. Since it was consuming time and it was prone to human error. As you can see, there is an example of little command line, the one we can use to generate that file. Could you go to the next slide, please? So talking about a little bit on challenges and lessons learned. we were facing three main challenges that we were able to identify. The first one was the strict launch date by the business. It was defined at the day, so we had to align to that day. What we had to do was to decide what we want to achieve for that day, the MVP, and how we were going to do that. So it drives us to choose open source technologies, such as what we just mentioned, Kubernetes, ArgoCD, which help us to automate the process and reduce times for those deliveries. So it helps us to use or to dedicate more time for the development. Also, another challenge we were able to identify is once we defined the technologies we wanted, was the lack of knowledge on building open source or on using open source technologies. So it was a journey because we had to learn and decide why we wanted to use that. As we just mentioned, for example, the decision of using ArgoCD was a journey to learn, but it also helped us to reduce times in some other areas. And last one but not least, at some point, we were maintaining up to 10 repositories because we were migrating from the old platform to the new one. So it was a challenge to smoothly transition from the old platform, maintaining all the data, creating scripts on different repositories to transition that data to a new one. So it was also a challenge. And at some point we had to reduce that and create monorepos, etc.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that, Alfredo. Both the architecture and the challenges. As you can tell, Kubernetes ArgoCD has made it significantly easier for us to deploy. But as Alfredo also mentioned, a lot of challenges did come our way. And what did we learn from this whole entire project utilizing all these technologies? The first lesson that we actually learned is we needed to make sure that we were introducing a lot of these open source technologies ahead of time. So that way folks can actually learn about it and utilize it to its full potential. During this whole entire project, we were learning and building at the same time. So sometimes we didn't really use the best practices, or as Alfredo mentioned earlier, we were deploying manually instead of sometimes going through the whole pipeline. And so this is something that we had to learn through the hard way. And so if you can't just be able to make sure that onboarding, knowledge transfer, all that good stuff about these technologies beforehand. The second lesson that we learned is we needed to add more observability to our different systems and applications. As Alfredo mentioned, we have quite a few clusters to manage. We needed to understand when those pods up and running successfully, how long, all those metrics are super important. So that way it allows us to debug and find root cause a lot more quickly and prevent some of the system outages that did happen when we did scale or, errors came up. So it's more of a preventative measure. So in the future, if we were to redo this, we wanted to add the observability as part of the launch. That way we can get that all set up beforehand. And then the last lesson that I like to share that we learned is it's also important not just to track observability, but also track your costs. As Alfredo mentioned, we're a nonprofit and it's really important for us to make sure that we're keeping track of our costs. Like all companies, trying to reduce costs, but still deliver great quality service. And so one way that we're wanting to do in the future is to auto scale these, not just the deployments, but also make sure we auto scale the pods. If there's more traffic, reduce the pods. If there's less traffic, just ultimately being able to fluctuate based on traffic to give the best service, but at the same time, reduce the computing cost. And going to our next slide in terms of impact, by doing all this project, incorporating all these tools and technologies, there are two great impacts that came out of this project utilizing Kubernetes, ArgoCD, and many other technologies. The first one is going to be, we were able to support over 20,000 people in Mexico since we launched. That is a huge amount of number who reached out to us and ultimately get the help that they needed. And two, our systems were able to scale to support over 1,500 checks per month. So making sure that ideally we will want to continually support more, but this is a great number to start with. So with that said, that concludes our session. Hopefully you learn a little bit about what the Trevor project is, our expansion project from utilizing Salesforce to more open source tool technology. Learn a little bit how you can utilize ArgoCD and Kubernetes within your own systems to ultimately do faster deployments or more safe deployments for your Kubernetes clusters and pods. If you ever want to learn more about what we do, feel free to contact Alfredo or myself, or just feel free to scan the QR code and reach out to us through there. Thank you so much, and hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.